Another exclusive for Spotify, the latest from our daily newsletter at podnews.net. Spotify has signed another exclusive, Anything Goes, with Emma Chamberlain. Described as one of the world's most listened to podcasts, will be exclusive on Spotify next year. The deal includes video podcasts too. The show was with UTA and Cadence 13's Ramble podcast network and is another loss for owner Odyssey, which is threatened with stock market delisting. The Infinite Dial New Zealand was published by Edison Research. 39% of adults in the country are monthly podcast listeners, placing New Zealand just above the US. 30% are weekly podcast listeners, and radio continues to do particularly well in the country. We've updated our market data slides. You'll find those in a link in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. Dan Meisner at Bumper has looked at the new topics that Apple Podcasts is automatically allocating to shows. He's produced a number of network maps designed to show links between different shows and produced episode topic maps for every category in Apple Podcasts. In the UK, radio and audio industry body Audio UK has called for more government action to put the audio production industry on the same footing as other legacy content industries. How's your microphone? Adobe has a free mic check tool. We've linked to that today from our newsletter. Triton Digital's US podcast ranker for October was released. Stitcher Media remains number one sales network. A press release tells us that the top 20 publishers did 241.5 million average weekly downloads. That number's up 3.2% month on month. And Triton Digital's Australian podcast ranker for October was released. We've had two press releases. ARN tells us that ARN's iHeart Podcast Network is number one, and Listener tells us that Listener is number one. And there are new podcast and video studios in Sydney, in New South Wales, in Australia, thanks to Tank Stream Labs and Ample. In People News, Sylvia Brudelli has been appointed as Chief Product Officer at NoMono, an audio recording tool developer. She joins from Telenor, a Norwegian telco. Cameron Moll has joined Buzzsprout as VP of Design. He's a design leader formerly of Meta and Pendo, and also founded short-form audio platform Spoken in 2015. And Jacob Kensley joined Amazon Music last month as a podcast partner specialist and is the first dedicated hiring for podcast partnerships at Amazon Music in the EU. He joins from Acast and Apple. In podcast news, in this week's Podnews Weekly Review with Buzzsprout, Sam Sethi interviews Jay LeBeouf from Descript after the company launched a new version of the editing software and announced another funding round. And what do you do when you have audio you don't know what to do with? Well, you launch a new podcast. Podnews Extra is here for extra interviews and audio from across the industry, including an interview that was too long for our normal weekly podcast with Chris Messina, an inventor of activity streams, which went on to become Activity Pub.
The core insight for Activity Streams and then Activity Pub was to say, well, we want to be able to syndicate information, just more than just blog posts.
Activity Pub now powers Mastodon, the replacement for Twitter, some say. Patagonia and PRX have announced Patagonia Stories, a new podcast series hosted by Arcana Ram, a managing editor on Patagonia's editorial team. They'll ask the questions that matter about our relationships with each other and the natural world. And FIFA Insight Live, a training center podcast, is Arsene Wenger's official FIFA World Cup podcast. It dropped its first episode this week and will be publishing new episodes on the whistle after every game in Qatar. The Webby Awards have been honouring the very best of the internet since 1996. Winners range from iconic early web throwbacks to recent viral sensations to powerhouse digital icons that have withstood the test of time. And I've won two as well. By participating, you can place your work on the same stage as boundary-pushing talent like past Webby winners The Meteor, Audible, HBO, Apple, The Washington Post, The Daily Daily, Crime Town, the New York Times, Pivot, California Love, and Lemonada Media, to name a few. Help them continue celebrating the most innovative, creative, and transformative work that shapes the online zeitgeist. You can learn more and enter the 27th Annual Webby Awards by their final entry deadline of December the 16th, 2022. You'll find a link in our show notes and our newsletter at podnews.net. And that's the latest from our newsletter. To read all the stories and subscribe, we're at podnews.net.